Damn, it feels good to be a gangster. A real gangsta-ass MAGA play his cards right. A real gangsta-ass MAGA never let up on the gas, cause real gangsta-ass MAGA don't mind fights. And riggers always gotta get clapped.
Paul Stone, co-founder and CEO of Colonial Metals Group, which is an advertiser on the show. It's a Florida-based precious metal supplier that helps clients develop secure retirement plans by investing in gold and silver. His writings appear at his Substack, thepaulstone.substack.com. Please welcome back to the show, Paul Stone. Hey, Paul.
Hey, Jimmy. Great to be back. Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone, to the Jimmy Dore family.
So it's good to see you. I want to play this, and I want to get your feedback on it. Let me play this. This was the big news.
50 basis point rate cut. The Federal Reserve slashing its benchmark interest rate by a half a percentage point to a new range of 4.75% to 5%, marking the first rate cut in more than 4 years. Now, Fed officials see 2 more 25 basis point rate cuts this year, followed by 4 more cuts next year and 2 more cuts in 2026. Breaking down what officials saw, 9 officials saw 4 cuts this year, so that includes the 50 basis point rate cut today. 7 saw 3 cuts, 2 officials saw 2 cuts this year, and 1 saw 5 cuts. Now, officials say in their statement they are gaining confidence that inflation is moving sustainably back down to 2%, saying, removing the word some, and now saying instead that inflation has made, quote, further progress towards the Fed's 2% goal. The statement also reading that, quote, the committee has gained greater confidence inflation is moving sustainably towards 2% and judges that the risks to achieving its employment and inflation goals are roughly in balance. Now, future rate cuts will depend on the evolving economic outlook, as well as the incoming data and the balance of risks. The outlook for interest rate projections come as Fed officials now see the unemployment rate rising to 4.4% this year and holding at that level over the next couple of years. That's up from 4% previously forecast. At the same time, economic growth is seen at 2% this year instead of 2.1% previously forecast, and officials expect the economy to coast at that 2% level over the next couple of years. As for inflation, they moved down their inflation outlook. They now see inflation ending the year at 2.6%. That's down from 2.8% previously, and then moving down to 2.2% over the next year. Now, there was some division on today's decision. It was a split vote. It was not unanimous. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman dissented, saying that she would have preferred to have cut rates by 25 basis points instead of 50. This marks the first dissent in 2 years. Back to you.
Okay, so here, before I go to you, Paul, let me just say, so there's this, I saw this interview with this guy, Joseph Wang, and he's got a whole shit ton of followers. And here's what he said that he was afraid of about this rate cut. Here's what he said.
Yeah, it was different for sure. You know, I would say that in the grand scheme of things, 25 basis points, 50 basis points really doesn't make that much difference, especially since most of the policy is transmitted not from the spot Fed funds rate, but from the implied path of policy. So basically watching what the 10-year would do, since that's what a lot of things are keyed off of. Mortgages, for example, largely keyed off of the 10-year treasury. So, you know, I wonder if at this moment, just this degree of uncertainty, just whether or not reflects 2 things. One is just, I think the difference in understanding what the post-pandemic economy looks like when it comes to the neutral rate. So not knowing just how restrictive or loose policy is. And secondly, just how you weigh that mandate of full employment and price stability. I imagine that the FOMC today is more sensitive to full employment than inflation, simply because of the change in the composition. So maybe that is also playing into, I think, more of a struggle to come together to have a consensus decision.
Absolutely. And you bring up the spot Fed funds rate. I mean, for the longest time, we were almost exclusively focused on the forecast because, as you rightly note, the outcome on the rate decision was a foregone conclusion. What did the Fed signal in terms of their forecasts for the rest of this year and then going forward?
No, I looked at the dot plot. It sounds like they're signaling a recession. What jumped out to me is that they revised upwards their unemployment rate forecast from 4% to 4.4%, and that is higher than their forecast of the long run unemployment rate. So if you have if you're forecasting a continuing uptick for the unemployment rate, not just the next few years, but basically throughout next year, that suggests some slowing in the economy that could potentially be a recession. So, of course, the Fed is never going to come out and say, we think that we're going to be in a recession, guys, prepare accordingly, because there's so much of that confidence game. But I think that's what they're thinking. And so that's part of the reason why they cut more aggressively this time. And our forecast to cut another 50 basis points by the end of this year.
So according to this guy, Paul, he says that what the real signal is that they think there's going to be a recession. But of course, they can't come out and say that. So what do you make of this?
That's what I make of it. I make of look, the trouble's not to me, and not a financial advisor, not a trained economist, but someone who studied this to understand it, because it was very confusing to me long time ago. And now I feel like I have at least a farmer's grip on things. And that is that the trouble can't go away. The money printing can't stop. It can't stop. So one place where he was talking earlier at a macro viewpoint on, where do interest rates really get determined? and that's when you're signing for a loan. The Fed pays $1.1 trillion a year in interest payments on the debt. When they reduce rates, let's say they just cut rates in half, then they would spend $500 million a year on interest payments on the debt. So it saves them money. But the money printing can't stop. So when you look at what's causing so much of the trouble, it's that we never got the corrective measure from a recession to reset things within the economy, because politically it's just too crazy to allow such a thing to happen, regardless of what party's in power. So it gets pushed off and pushed on down the road until that recession comes through the door, whether you like it or not, and there is no more printing money to keep it from happening. Cutting rates has always been historically a sign, or an action, I should say, forget that word. It's an action to head off or juice the economy as it's going through a recession. They were much harder to detect for the brainiacs in Washington and at the Federal Reserve. It happened so regularly, and there's so many things that trigger before a recession, and they're all triggered. They've been triggered since 2018. I won't go through the boring list of them, but picture at least 12 different economic indicators that trigger before a recession and can only show up if you're headed towards one because of the math. They've been triggered since 2018.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So the Fed is supposed to do two things, right? The Fed is supposed to control the interest rates, and they're also supposed to control employment. Is that what am I getting those wrong?
No. Good. That's good analysis. Their job is to maintain moderate growth without any overheating or any nosedives into the ground. And so if they see typically what it would always cause, and I think, to put this one in your hat for a minute, everyone who's listening, the real thing that would generally cause an economy to overheat is full employment, because everyone's working. Now everyone has extra money. Companies are fighting to keep their workers from leaving for more lucrative offers at other companies, because what are companies trying to do? Grow. So to grow, they get more, they make more, get more folks working, make more stuff, sell more stuff, earn more money, hire more workers, make more stuff. On it goes until you run out of workers. You run out of workers, then you're going to pay, company B, workers there to come over to your company and pay them more than what they're currently earning, right? So generally workers have incredible wage growth at the end of an economic expansionary period, a bull market. And they're out buying bass boats and all kinds of trips and all kinds of extras they couldn't usually buy at their moderate income levels. But now that the economy's running out of workers, they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for workers, they're getting paid a lot more. So when that part of the economy overheats, the Fed starts cranking up rates. And what does that do historically? It gets those people fired, because now your economy slows down, the companies can't sell as much, we can't buy as much, and the company then sheds workforce and sends those folks to their couches waiting for them to be hired back. And that lack now killing of consumption causes inflation to come down. So that's generally how they seek to moderate growth. When it gets too hot, they cool it down with raising rates. And when it gets too cold, they lower rates to juice it back up. So if they're lowering rates, they have to.
So if
that's not a good sign.
The way the Fed fights inflation is it puts people out of work, and the way it puts people out of work is it raises interest rates, which makes money tighter and harder to come by. And so they do that on purpose. This is the craziest thing to me, but that's how this capitalism works. And so now they say, now they're forecasting 4.4% unemployment, but we know that's not the real unemployment, because as you've taught us on the show and other people have talked about on the show, they don't count unemployment the way they used to count unemployment in the 80s. They count it way differently. And if they count it correctly, it would be somewhere over 10%. Some people say 15, you say upwards of 20%.
I'm just using the old-fashioned way of counting. It's not my number. It's the number that was used for hundreds of years to count unemployment. Says the number is 25%.
And let's remember that during the Great Depression, the unemployment rate was 25%. Yeah. And so that's why I think, you hear all these rosy forecasts about the economy and people talking nicely about the economy, but they use this phony unemployment number. We're really living through something. I see people hurting all over the place. People without enough money to afford their groceries, which have doubled, and their housing prices, which have doubled since 2010. Their salaries haven't doubled. Right, we're going to talk about that. Right, we're going to talk about that in a second. But so that's the news is they've cut 0.5% off the interest rate, and according to that news report I played from Yahoo, they're going to cut it like 6 more times going forward. That's the plan anyway. Yeah. And why would they be wanting to do that? Because they see the economy slowing down. They see us going into a recession, as this guy just said. They see us going into a recession, so they're going to start cutting. And by the way, it wasn't unanimous, right? So usually it's a foregone conclusion. But I want to show you this. So Forbes, so this is a new article I just came out. When did it come out? Yesterday? It says gold keeps hitting new. Now, you're my gold guy, which is why I always have you on to talk about this stuff. Gold is hitting new record highs. Why it's outperforming stocks as rate cuts provide the latest boost. So when they cut the rates, the interest rates, people start buying more gold. And I'll just give you a real summary of this. It says gold prices continue to skyrocket, closing last week at another record high as several factors help boost the precious metal, which has actually outperformed the blistering stock market in 2024. Spot gold prices ended Friday at a new record of $2,622 per ounce in New York, according to FactSet data, extending its year-to-date gain to 27.1%, topping U.S. benchmark S&P 500 stock index balmy 20.8% return, including reinvested dividends. Gold is on track for its best return since 2010, outpacing even 2020's 25.1% gain as the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated doomsday investment bets. The most recent lift to gold prices was the Federal Reserve's Wednesday's decision to institute the first interest rate cut in 4.5 years, which provides a pair of tailwinds for the metal, according to conventional wisdom, as gold prices rose 2% from Tuesday to Friday. Lower rates of return on other non-stock assets, which offer fixed payments tied to the Fed set interest rates like shortened government bonds and certificates of deposit CDs, may make gold a more popular diversification option, and gold is considered perhaps the most popular hedge against inflation, meaning if the Fed acted too swiftly and the United States inflation gets worse again, gold prices should benefit. Here's the last slide. But it's not just U.S. monetary policy boosting gold, as experts tie the increased appetite for gold to geopolitical risks globally, including from the United States election and the ongoing wars between Russia, Ukraine, and Israel, Palestine. So, wow, it just won't stop.
No, and who knows how high it could go. If you think of the stock market of being worth around $55 trillion, and if just the entire precious metals marketplace around the world is around $4 trillion, if just 10% of that money decided to change hands, you could cause gold and silver prices to rotate 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times. The only reason Bitcoin just rose to incredible heights is there's 21 million Bitcoin and many, many hundreds of billions of dollars chasing after it, right? So when something in short supply gets squeezed mightily, the price reflects that. That's all it's doing. And when you look at one other reason, perhaps, to be cutting rates, or one benefactor who's mentioned there in the article. So if I just said, Jimmy, do you think you can make 6% from the stock market over the next 12 months? And you might say, I don't know, maybe I'd lose. What if I paid you 6% guaranteed to park that money with my firm for a year? You might think, I'll just take the 10% that's guaranteed. That's kind of what a CD is. It says, hey, we'll pay you this percentage for a year or longer. You can lock it in for longer. So when you lower rates, and rates are 4%, what if I just paid you 3% to keep your money locked up for a year? You might think, well, I could probably at least get 4 from the market, and then you risk it. And so you cause more money to fly out of CDs, and any interest rate bearing kind of account starts leaving those accounts because the rate's dropping for riskier stuff, which helps juice the market and make it look great. But since the year 1997, which is a turning point in our workforce when the baby boomers began to retire, to today, gold is up 8,000% and the market is up 5,000%.
And I've seen, I wish I would have put this in this segment, but people are talking about how Warren Buffett is doing the exact same things that he did before the big stock market crash in 2008, that this guy's been the predictor and seer of things that other people don't see. And so he's doing all those things, which leads me to be nervous about the economy and the stock market. I know that the stock market is overly inflated and bullshit, full of fuckery and bullshit. And I don't have any, I've taken my money out of the stock market. So, when you put money in 401ks and all that stuff, I take that money now it's self-directed into gold and other things. I have some in T-bills, what have you. But I don't, I mean, so the last time somebody else, I saw this on Twitter, someone showed that on the exact same day, last Wednesday, when they cut the interest rate by 0.5%, they did the exact thing on the exact same day in 2008. 0.5 percentage point, they cut it on the exact day, September, whatever that day was, 21st or whatever. They did it the exact same day in 2008. And we know what happened after that. There was the big crash. So anyway, that's just a weird coinky dink, I'm sure. But Warren Buffett, that thing, the fact that now it looks like inflation's going to happen, they think that a recession's going to happen. I don't have any faith in the stock market. Do you, Paul?
No, I don't. But I don't want to be giving anyone financial advice, and I don't want to cause concern if there isn't any. I try to give validity to folks' concerns if they're already doing the research and have some. You know, in my last Substack, I just showed some general figures and calculations of how much money's been printed since 2010 and where that went, right? It went into real estate. The extra amount of money went into real estate in the market, and those are up mightily. But wages have barely changed for the American household. And the cost of everything's gone up. And people talk about cutting rates to make homes more affordable. But that speeds up economic activity. And the money printing state can't stop. So everything that goes into a house is going to go up. So prices will go up even higher, right, than they currently are, and push even more people out of owning a home. So when you look at how the game has been running, whether it's rigged or whatever you want to call it, it's just artificial money coming out of thin air, like a Niagara Falls sized amount of money pouring into the economy every second of the day, and has been for 20, 30 years. And it's causing us to look like we're unbeatable and unbreakable. But the dollar, the value of it has been dying. You got to kill something if you want to inflate something artificially. And so the dollar's gone from 56 cents to 3 in the last 24 years, and that's not going to stop. And by the average amount of money or value that it loses every year, it's losing 2 cents a year on average since the year 2000. So next year it's worth 0.7 of a penny. Mathematically speaking, Jimmy, there are going to be things that no one can answer for because we're still dealing with mathematics, which is part of the world of physics, and it's unyielding. It doesn't matter who's at the podium saying rosy things. You're killing the actual resource that causes us to enjoy life today, and also causes probably 70% of America to be just feeling like they live in a frustrating shitstorm.
Well, here, I want to show you this. So they're talking about what the Fed cut has to do with people's ability to buy a home. And so let's listen to a little bit of this.
Sobering. It followed a few different...
So he's talking about a story that they did, and here it is.
Sobering. It followed a few different families or whatever in their experience in the U.S. housing market. And it looked across generations and income levels. And the focal point was this family who was in their late 20s or early 30s. They had just had a kid. They're living in an apartment in the suburbs of Philly. They both have very good jobs. This is kind of like the average, like this is a household creation, but they just can't afford to get out of their, 800 square foot Philly apartment because home prices are at record highs. They're up 40% over the past couple of years. And mortgage rates on top of that are 7% at the time I spoke to them. They were kind of lamenting, like, our friends who bought homes because they were at that point in their life 2 years ago got 2% interest rates, 3% interest rates. Home prices weren't as high, So if this family who's probably middle to upper middle class based on their income level, they're kind of, they just had a kid, they're high propensity consumers, like they buy a lot of things. They're going to go furnish a home. They're going to buy baby stuff. They got to pay for back to school things each and every year. Like this is the core American consumer. They can't even afford a home. That's like a ridiculous failing, I think, of policymakers that exists. I think there's a variety of reasons why the housing market is like this. It's really helped those who are asset owners, baby boomers in particular, those who don't have a mortgage, those with multiple homes. They get a ton of rental income. They can unlock the equity in their real estate. It just provides them a lot of spending power. But for the millennials and Gen Z who are looking at housing, what are they going to do? Why is this the world that we're living in? For one, housing supply post GFC was just dramatically crimped, right? Supply did not grow enough to meet demand. I think the Fed buying trillions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities didn't help. Obviously, if you basically just lubricate the entire housing market, which A, helps asset owners via QE, B, it just makes financing conditions incredibly easy, you're going to help home prices rise. And now we have higher rates and prices aren't going to go down because people won't give up their low rate mortgages. It was a big tightening cycle, but it happened post one of the easiest monetary policies we've ever seen in the entire world in all of history. Like they bought trillions of dollars of debt in a very short time span. Rates were zero. On a real basis, they were negative, and rates were negative across the world. You can't come out of that and expect everything to be normal. And I think the housing market improves a bit as rates come down. It sounds like supply should increase. Home builders are doing very well. Home builder stocks are doing very well. But by and large, like, is this getting better anytime soon? I think anecdotally, the thing you hear most is, when is there going to be a crash so I can finally buy a home? Because these people are confident that their careers are safe, their career growth trajectories look safe. It just doesn't even look reasonable to own a home, which has been a huge source of net wealth for older generations in this country, right? Their home prices appreciated without them doing anything. They were sitting on $1 million lot. They had no idea by the time they were 60, and they're sitting pretty. They can spend down their income or just save. Yeah, it is quite literally what this country is like centered its social picture around, or its social identity is like that white picket fence, owning a home, the opportunity for people to come here and do that. And we've radically radically crimped the ability for the average person to do so.
So I mean, and what has led to this explosion in housing prices? He said it's up 40%. Housing prices are up 40% over the last couple of years, and that's a big part of that. He talked about buying mortgage debt securities. Does that also mean money printing?
Well, yes, absolutely. What do you think they bought the dead securities with?
Right.
You know, and it also keeps. This is what I said at the top of the show. I said it keeps the corrective measures, the natural corrective measures. That, you know, if you just thought of the economy with some seasons to it, right? The leaves fall off the trees, you know, in the fall, and then you have winter, and then things come back to life. So if we don't get those corrective measures to come through the economy, then you are carrying a ton of zombie companies and zombie enterprises through our economy, which become dead weight. So you have to print even more because you never got back to running lean and mean like a recession actually does. A recession, though it's painful and difficult to go through, it's like hand in a glove. You can't have the expansionary period without the corrective period, which kicks off the new expansionary period. And here's what goes into real estate. This is where I have a value to people, because I truly look under the hood. Hopefully people can read my ugly writing there, but we have, you know, general components to what goes into real estate. These are all commodities, folks. So if concrete's up, wood's up, metal's up, electricity's up, oil for asphalt is up, plastics are up, carpet is up, all the things that go into making this stuff, tile, sheetrock, right? Labor, food. If all that's up, we have one more to add to the very bottom that supports all of it, energy. Energy's up, all those costs are up. Guess what's happening to the house price? It goes up. It costs more to build it, so they got to make their profits off of it. And they're still printing money at the bank level because they're loaning 10 times the amount of money they're actually sitting on, which was created by a policy created by Bill Clinton when he was president to help people without perfect credit or great credit own a home, which is nice. It's a great thing to think of, but there's a mathematical offset. All of these verbal ideas, thought bubble ideas have a mathematical penalty to pay if it's artificial. If you're doing anything to create money that isn't really created by the economy, you eventually create an economy that can't live without printed money. And that's where we're at. And so when they talk about how bad housing has gone up in the last 4 years, there were 16 markets in America where it would cost you $1 million or more to get into a home. Today, there are 60 markets where it costs you at least $1 million to get in the home. And go back, you know, just 20, 30 years, Jimmy, what was $1 million home, right? In the 80s. That was a palace.
That was
buying a palace today for $1 million. It's all from the government policy. He's right there, but it's printing money to literally keep their GDP target of 2% growth a year a positive number. Because if you backed out all the money the Fed and the federal government have printed since 2010, we would not have a positive GDP number. Every year it would be negative. You'd see your economy contracting. Imagine what the politics would look like then.
So I'm going to go to your Substack, where you say housing, the cornerstone of the American dream, also became a luxury item, which is what those two guys were just saying. The average home price jumped from $221,000 in 2010 to a staggering $440,000 in 2024. That's a cool 99% increase, effectively pricing out a large chunk of the population. While the investing participants and the home flippers saw wild growth from this, the average U.S. household income barely increased from $49,000 to $78,000. That's a 37% bump. And so if the housing went up almost 100%, you only got a 37% bump. So now you're going to have to spend like 60-some% more of your money and your income on a house. So how evil is that from this flood of money from thin air into the economy, lifting many boats higher, capsize those of most Americans? This flood is drowning them. Simply put, if costs double, your income has to double or you're drowning. Sure, you're making a few bucks more, but it's nowhere near enough to keep up with the skyrocketing prices. Rent, it's a similar story, doubling from $1,083 to $2,100. So while you might be bringing home a slightly fatter paycheck, you are also watching it evaporate faster than ever. And if you're thinking of starting a family, better brace yourself. The cost to raise a child to 18 more than doubled, jumping from $226,000 in 2010 to a crushing $465,000 in 2024. It's like kids are now made of gold, or at least priced as if they were. So all this stuff is going up way more than people's incomes are going up. And that's why people are feeling squeezed. And people are, I know, people with good jobs saying, I will never be able to buy a house. It's a crazy, it's crazy what we're in right now and what's happening. And you're saying a big part of that is the way how poorly they've managed the fiscal policy in the United States.
All of it. All of it is due to that, Jimmy. All of it. All of it. Because think of nature on its own. Doesn't it water itself? Doesn't it sun itself? Isn't actually, you know, the life on Earth a life of bounty and ease of access? That's how life works on Earth. Look outside your window. Where's the struggle? Are the birds struggling? Are the crickets struggling? Is the grass struggling to grow? What about the trees? Are they struggling? There's no struggle. But when man decided to manage the weather, starting back in 1913, when the Federal Reserve was created, you have a committee now that manages our financial weather. And I would say they've done a horrific job at it. And I wish they would come to the podium and just be honest and say they should all quit, because it's just created at least 70% of our country is feeling torture. Easily half of 40% of our country doesn't earn enough money to have to pay taxes. Why don't we look at those milestones for, is the government a successful enterprise? Let's look under the hood. Let's get away from the personalities. Let's look actually at what the decision-making has been for the last 30 years. Anyone could have foreseen when the baby boomers began to retire, our economy would go in a black hole. It isn't profitable, folks. The United States of America, its economy is not profitable and hasn't been since the early 2000s. That's why debt went from $4 trillion to $36 trillion almost. That's why they literally had to print the deficit that our economy didn't produce enough revenue to cover its own costs. So now you say, oh my God, they really are killing the dollar. Right. And mathematically, where will it end? When the dollar's worth nothing. So where will you want your savings to have been when the dollar's worth nothing? In dollar-based assets, dollar-driven things, or things outside of the dollar? And that's my main point. It's to say, folks, let's stop looking at all this crazy, sick personalities that come to Washington and are on the news.
Oh, he froze.
Every day and all throughout the week. Let's look at what they've actually been doing to us. This vote isn't going to save anything. It can change how things go. You could be for one person, one for the other. You could be voting for joy and happiness. You could be voting for economic change on one hand. But either way, the government has to print because the economy isn't profitable. And I'd love for some true pro to show me how I'm wrong in 5 minutes without boring me with some 2.5-hour speech on how modern monetary theory is going to work. Because I'm not looking for theories anymore, and neither should you. You should be looking for something solid, something real, something you actually own for a while. Until you wake up in the morning, and this isn't the news. And Paul Stone isn't on the Jimmy Dore show talking about how ruinous our government has taken our country.
So I have one more video, but I think it's about housing.
With respect to mortgage rates,
so let me just play it and get your reaction.
With respect to mortgage rates, we were up at 8% at one point. We're now at 6.5% or so. Despite that, the average effective mortgage rate in America, with all the people who have mortgages, the average of that is about 3.5%. How does that line up with Fed rate cuts? And what do those rate cuts in specific do for the housing market, if anything?
Yeah, it's interesting because we're going to cut rates and probably still have that average mortgage rate rise, right? As renters come off the sideline and start buying homes. But yeah, I think, unfortunately, to make it more about stocks, I think home builders have a really unique opportunity, and they've been rewarded for it in terms of valuation, that they can pay down, they can do mortgage rate pay downs. So like when an existing home comes back onto market and you have to pay 6.5% to get that loan, a builder might be like, all right, we'll make it 3% for your first year and 4% for your second year, 5% for your third year. That's really attractive. So it's actually huge for new homes. But the majority of home supply in this country is existing. Like people don't buy new homes all the time. And, there's work from home, there's remote work, but jobs are clustered in urban areas and the surrounding suburbs. Most of the transactions are going to be in existing homes. Overarchingly, what you might worry about is that as people have less disposable income, because more goes to mortgage servicing, like if you take out a 5% mortgage, you have less to spend. That decreases consumer spending and eventually leads to, I guess a slower economy, right? We have less consumer demand. I don't think the issue is that huge. I think people broadly will be okay with these mortgage rates. Historically, they're normal. Let's say we get to 5.5%. I think that'll be all right. Fortunately or unfortunately, we have a lot of pro housing demand policies probably coming from the next administration. Let's say it's 50-50 between Harris and Trump. And Harris is most 100% likely to stimulate housing demand. Then we have a 50% chance that home demand is stimulated. So, that's not good from a house price issue, but it probably helps the cohort specific, a new home buyer. It helps them. So we'll see. It really doesn't look like there's much to help the housing market right now. It'll incrementally improve, but I think developed economies across the world are dealing with a housing crisis issue. Canada's home prices are brutal. No one can afford anything. They had a ton of foreign demand come in, obviously, to urban areas. But yeah, it's a tough problem, and we kind of created it for ourselves. We'll see if there are stimulative fiscal policies that can help supply rather than just demand, and help new homes get built. I think deregulation in terms of zoning laws and stuff like that. There's just too much red tape in terms of getting new houses up. But that's not for the Fed to really do, right? And they kind of played their part by buying quite literally trillions of dollars of mortgage-backed securities. But yeah, the Fed should not be cutting rates to help the housing market per se.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is that so if the new administration tries to spur demand, That's going to make house pricing go even higher. What you got to do is figure out a way to create a bigger, more supply. And he's saying that it doesn't look like they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, you create more supply, you create more demand on all these commodities that go into your house. Those commodity prices go up. The cost to build the house goes up. It just keeps going up. Only a correction where people can't buy will cause home prices to become more affordable. And just the overarching viewpoint is that from when we left normal monetary policy years in 1971, a house was $17,000 and your salary was $9,000. So just look how close buying a home was to your salary. It was just twice your salary, right? I showed you earlier that average income, and there's a lot of high-paying jobs in our economy that are skewing that number up to $78,000 as an average salary in this country. But $78,000 to a home price of $450 is a lot more than double, right? That's 6x. That's 600% away from your average salary. But also at the time in 1971, eggs were cheap, gas was cheap, all commodities were cheap. And all of those things aren't the case today. They're very expensive. So when he talks about interest rates hurting consumer spending because the mortgage payment's bigger than it used to be, so that's less money going into the economy, that's true. All the different areas that would make an economy wholesome are rotten to the core. And this ends one day. This ends, mathematically speaking. If I was that guy on Star Trek, the cyborg guy, I would just say, well, the economy ends when you can't print money. So when can you not print money? When it's worth zero. How close are we to that? I don't know. Mathematically, maybe a year or two, maybe sooner.
Okay. Wow.
Try to make something better, like, let's increase supply. Okay, so we're going to incentivize home builders to build, but the cost is still there. So is the government going to give them tax breaks or something? That just means the government gets less money in taxes. So what does it do? Prints what it's missing. Kamala has the idea of starting a bunch of small businesses, wants to give new business owners $25,000. I think I forget exactly how many businesses she wants to see started, but that's $1.25 trillion that she's proposing the government would print and give people to then go start a business. Who knows if those businesses should actually exist in the economy? Maybe it just causes a bunch of people to end up filing bankruptcy. And then what? All of these government ideas to stimulate. If you have to stimulate something and do it artificially, you're in trouble. People just hear that. It's stimulating something.
For the love of cash money.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit
Isn't it swell?
They found a rabbi hole, tunnels and all. There's Jews in the walls. Isn't it bliss? The rabbinical grace soiling the mattresses. Well, let me tell you. If I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum, all day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, you know, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, you know, the babies that have been murdered, you know, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, you know, money poor people. You know, this government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But, you know, something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. You know, we don't really know what war is. You know, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, you know, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison, but they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, you know, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, you know, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators, and they're going to have riots on their hands. You know, they're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. You know, we have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating, you know, what we need, what needs to be done. And, you know, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. I mean, you know, don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, you know, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, you know, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, you know, this system and those backing the officials running this system, you know, want people to believe that revolution means violence, you know, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. You know, when people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. You know, they get it from us
accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it, then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. You know, every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. You know, men, women, and children were murdered. And not just move babies, you know. What about all of the young men, women, you know, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, you know, by drug pushers? I mean, you know, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, you know, making a quick buck, you know. I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, you know, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, you know, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. You know, how long are people going to sit back and beg, you know, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years all you've gotten is a slap in the face? All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.